We are back with Maryland Governor Wes Moore on a very busy news night. There's so much I wanted to ask you about, and you gave that amazing speech this morning in Maryland, the government shutdown. But yesterday also, Trump and Hegseth gave what I thought was a bizarre, politicized event. They did a bizarre and politicized event in front of 4, 3, 2, 1-star members of the U.S. military. You were a veteran yourself. And there are a couple of things that struck me. They talked about fighting a war from within. They talked about these silly rules of engagement. When you're in the military, and you know this better than I do, but I've worked with a member of they serve the commander in chief. They report to him. They do what he orders. And I just wonder if we're in just a different moment where there should be some questioning. Or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was really disheartening. I received a text from a person who I served with before, and he said to me, he said, you know, it's normal to disagree with the commander-in-chief. He said, but I don't know if it's normal to be embarrassed by him. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I'm embarrassed. You know, and when we take the oath, we take the oath that we are going to follow the Constitution of the United States of America, and we will follow the lawful orders of the commander-in-chief. It's the same thing, and it's the same very humble responsibility that I take as the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. That I know that the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard, they move on the command of the commander-in-chief, that I'm giving them lawful orders. But I also think there's a confidence amongst the members of the Maryland National Guard and the Maryland Air Guard is that I would only ever give lawful orders. And that's the struggle that I think for a lot of members of the military, they're figuring right now. We will follow the commands of our commander-in-chief. That's the oath that we took. When they're lawful. And I think there's a lot of people who right now, when they heard the words from the commander-in-chief yesterday about talking about using American cities as training grounds, they're not receiving lawful orders. In fact, they're receiving orders that are in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and of U.S. law. And so this is what is making this moment so tricky. It's not just the fact that, you know, hearing Pete Hegseth ridicule people about merit is really rich when he is the most unqualified Secretary of Defense that this country's ever seen. But it's past that. It's that we are hearing from our commander-in-chief about instructions that he is giving to the members of our military that are not just nonsensical, they're unlawful. And that puts the members of our military in a really complicated situation.
What can they do?
They don't have to follow them. We have to follow lawful orders. We follow the instructions of our commander-in-chief. We follow the Constitution of the United States of America. But I cannot stress enough that word lawful matters. And in fact, we are told you do not have to follow unlawful orders. And so I think this becomes a really challenging moment for the members of our military when you usually have the ability to trust that the orders that you are getting are lawful. I think if we have seen anything from the precedent of this Trump administration, that is not always a guarantee nor a prerequisite for the decisions and the orders that they're given.
One of the things I enjoy talking to governors is that you just call things out because you've been in a position, as other governors had, to kind of oversee things and make decisions. I wanted to play something for you that Governor J.B. Pritzker said today. He talked a little bit about sending troops into cities, something that he's grappling with, as you have with the city of Chicago. Let's play that when we talk about it.
Into cities thinking that that's some sort of proving ground for war, or that indeed there's some sort of internal war going on in the United States is just, frankly, inane. And I'm concerned for his health. There is something genuinely wrong with this man, and the 25th Amendment ought to be invoked.
You agree with him?
I love JV. And listen, one thing that I do know is there's this chicken hawk behavior. There is this fascination and obsession with the United States military. And maybe it's because he's never served himself. Maybe because he's never worn the uniform. Trump, sorry. Not JB, but Trump. Yeah. Maybe because he's never worn the uniform. But there is this fascination that he has about that the answer to everything is deploy the United States military like he's a child.
Like playing Battleship.
Correct. Like this is a childish game, without realizing that the people that he's talking about, these are real people. These are citizen soldiers These are people who have raised their hand to put on the uniform. These are people who are willing to leave their families and give their life if necessary. People who took the same oath that I took. People who, and as someone who has worn the uniform, who has said goodbye to my family, and who has said goodbye to my family without the assurance that I would ever be able to reunite with them again, but I love this country enough and that I was willing to do it. Those are the men and women that we're talking about. And so when the President of the United States is so willy-nilly willing to talk about, I'll deploy them here and deploy them there, as if this is a Wall Street trade, it is deeply disrespectful to the members of our military, deeply disrespectful to their families, and frankly, very much beneath the office that he holds.
Before I let you go, you're not ready to invoke the 25th Amendment. That's okay. But do you think, just back to the shutdown very quickly, do you think Trump knows how to end this shutdown?
No, because I think this is not some type of deviation. It's a continuation. Donald Trump has been shutting down the federal government in Maryland since he's been in office. Donald Trump has now fired over 15,000 federal workers in the state of Maryland. Donald Trump has denied grants and research dollars to our research institutions. Donald Trump has started put tariffs that started trade wars that has now risen the price on everything. Energy prices in the state of Maryland have jumped by 20% since Donald Trump has been the president of the United States. It's not that I don't think he knows how to end the federal government shutdown. I don't think he has an interest in ending the federal government shutdown.
And that is a core issue. Governor Wes Moore, thank you so much for being here with me. We covered a lot of issues.